My name is Daniel, and at 65 years old, I found myself adrift after retiring from 40 years as an engineer. When my son Jeffrey suggested I move in with his family, I felt grateful until he said those words, "I don't want to feed an extra mouth." Instead, he found me a job at his company. I smiled and agreed, swallowing my pride. What else could I do but when I walked through those corporate doors? I never expected what would happen when his boss recognized what my son had overlooked for years. If you're watching from a place where family is everything, drop a comment below and subscribe to my channel. You'll never guess what happened when I met my son's boss. After 40 years of dedicated work as a mechanical engineer, I thought my retirement would be peaceful. My wife Martha and I had carefully saved for these golden years, planning trips we'd never had time for and projects around the house we'd always postponed. We had a modest but comfortable home in a friendly neighborhood in Connecticut, purchased 30 years ago when Jeffrey was just a boy. Martha and I met in college. She was studying literature while I pursued engineering. Despite our different interests, we complemented each other perfectly. She brought creativity into my structured world, and I provided the stability she appreciated. We married right after graduation, and Jeffrey came along 3 years later. We weren't wealthy, but we provided Jeffrey with everything he needed. I worked extra shifts to pay for his college education at an expensive private university where he studied finance. Martha took on part-time work to help with the expenses. We never complained about these sacrifices. Isn't that what parents do? 2 years ago, Martha was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She fought bravely, but passed away just 5 months after diagnosis. Her final words to me were, "Daniel, promise me you'll find joy again." After Martha died, our house became unbearably quiet. I'd wake up reaching for her only to find her side of the bed empty. The grief was overwhelming. I stopped maintaining our garden, which Martha had loved. Dust gathered on surfaces, dishes piled in the sink. I lost 15 pounds because cooking for one person seemed pointless. Depression crept in like a slow fog. I stopped going to my weekly chess club meetings. I declined invitations from neighbors. Some days I wouldn't even change out of my pajamas. My doctor prescribed antidepressants, but they made me feel foggy and disconnected. One Sunday afternoon, Jeffrey visited with his family. It had been nearly 3 months since they'd last come by. Jeffrey had always been career-focused even as a child. Now, at 38, he was the chief financial officer at Tech Vision, a growing technology company. He'd married Sarah, a corporate attorney, and they had 2 children, Sam 10 and Emma 8. "Dad, this place is a mess," Jeffrey said, surveying the living room with obvious disapproval. He picked up an empty coffee mug from the coffee table. "When was the last time you cleaned?" I shrugged. "I get around to it when I need to." Sarah kept the children close as though my grief might be contagious. "Kids, why don't you go play in the backyard?" she suggested, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. After the children left, Jeffrey sat across from me. "Dad, I'm worried about you. Living alone isn't working." "I'm fine," I insisted. "No, you're not. Look at this place. Look at you." His tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Jeffrey had always been practical, even as a child. He preferred mathematics to storybooks, spreadsheets to imagination. "I'm still adjusting," I said. "It's been 2 years, Dad. Mom wouldn't want you living like this." He wasn't wrong. Martha would have been dismayed by the state of our home, by the state of me. "Sarah and I have been talking," Jeffrey continued. "We think you should sell this place and move in with us. Our house is big enough and you'd save on expenses." The offer caught me off guard. Jeffrey and I had never been particularly close. He'd always been busy with school, then college, then his career. Our conversations typically revolved around practical matters. I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a heart-to-heart talk. "That's a big step," I said cautiously. "This house has a lot of memories." "Memories won't keep you company, Dad. You're all alone here and it's not healthy. Plus, financially, it makes sense. Property taxes in this area keep rising and you're heating and cooling a 3-bedroom house for just one person." There was the Jeffrey I knew, always calculating the bottom line. Still, I couldn't deny the financial logic of his argument. My retirement savings were solid, but not extravagant. Without Martha's Social Security benefits, my monthly income had decreased. "I'll think about it," I promised. "Don't think too long," Jeffrey advised, standing up. "The real estate market is hot right now. You could get a good price for this place." As they prepared to leave, little Emma hugged my legs. Grandpa, if you live with us, you can read me stories every night. Her innocent enthusiasm was the most compelling argument I'd heard all day. After they left, I wandered through the house touching Martha's things, her collection of ceramic birds on the mantel, her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her gardening gloves hanging by the back door. How could I leave all this behind? But as night fell and the house grew dark and silent, I had to admit that Jeffrey might be right. The memories were precious, but they were also painful. Perhaps a change would do me good. The following week, I called Jeffrey and agreed to his proposal. I would sell the house and move in with his family. The relief in his voice was palpable. That's great, Dad. I'll help you get the place ready for market. I didn't know then how much I would come to question this decision. I couldn't have predicted the words my son would say that would shake the foundation of our relationship. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you think you have it all figured out. The process of preparing my house for sale was like dismantling my life piece by piece. Each item I packed represented a memory, a moment shared with Martha. Our wedding china that we only used on special occasions, photo albums documenting our life together, the collection of seashells from our 20th anniversary trip to the Florida Keys. You can't take all this stuff to our house, Dad, Jeffrey said as he helped me sort through the living room. We don't have space for it. You'll need to downsize. I knew he was right, but it felt like I was erasing Martha from my life. How do you decide which memories to keep and which to discard? I've been thinking, Jeffrey said, breaking my reverie. I have some good news for you. What's that? I asked, carefully wrapping Martha's favorite crystal vase in newspaper. I've found you a job. I looked up, confused. A job? I'm retired Jeffrey. I know, but hear me out. He sat down on the couch, his expression serious. Living with us is going to be an adjustment for everyone. The thing is, Dad, I don't want to feed an extra mouth. You're still healthy and capable. You need purpose, something to get you out of bed in the morning. His words hit me like a physical blow. I don't want to feed an extra mouth. After decades of providing for him, sacrificing for him, this was how he saw me, as a burden, another mouth to feed. I struggled to keep my face neutral, to not show how deeply his words had wounded me. What kind of job? I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. At Tech Vision, my company, we need someone for facility maintenance, basic repairs, overseeing contractors, that sort of thing. The hours are reasonable and the pay is decent, plus you'd have something to do during the day. From engineer to janitor, from designing complex systems to changing light bulbs, was this what my professional life had come to? I have 40 years of engineering experience, Jeffrey, I said quietly. I know, Dad, but you're 65. Most companies aren't looking to hire engineers at your age. This is a good opportunity. You'd have health benefits, too. I wanted to remind him that I had managed the construction of power plants, had led teams of dozens of engineers, had patents in my name. Instead, I swallowed my pride. What choice did I have? I'd already agreed to sell my house. I couldn't afford to rent an apartment on my retirement income alone. That sounds fine, I lied. Thank you for thinking of me. Jeffrey looked relieved. Great, you can start next Monday. I'll pick you up on my way to work. That night, after Jeffrey left, I sat alone in Martha's garden, now overgrown with weeds. I thought about all we had sacrificed for Jeffrey. Working overtime to pay for his education at Princeton, co-signing the loan for his first car, contributing to the down payment on his first house. When Jeffrey was accepted to that prestigious university, Martha and I were ecstatic but terrified of the cost. We remortgaged our house. I took on consulting work on weekends. Martha worked extra shifts at the library. We never took vacations. We drove the same cars for 15 years. All so Jeffrey could have the best education, the best start in life. And now I was an extra mouth to feed. I looked up at the stars, wishing Martha were here to advise me. She had always been better at handling Jeffrey's pragmatic nature. He means well, she would say. He just expresses love differently. But this didn't feel like love. It felt like obligation, like I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. I pulled out the small photo of Martha I kept in my wallet. Her smile, captured 5 years ago during our trip to the Grand Canyon, still radiated warmth. What would you do, Martha? I whispered to her image. The stars offered no answer, and neither did Martha's frozen smile. I made a decision then. I would take this job, humble as it was. I would move into my son's house, but I would also start saving every penny, Somehow I would reclaim my independence. I wouldn't remain an extra mouth to feed for long. The next morning, as I continued packing, I came across my old engineering textbooks and journals. I had kept them all these years, occasionally referencing them for projects. Now they seemed like relics from another life. I added them to the donation pile, ignoring the twinge of loss I felt. Jeffrey had made it clear my expertise was no longer valuable, at least not to him. The day of the move arrived faster than I expected. My neighbor Bill helped load the few pieces of furniture I was keeping into a small rental truck. Most of my possessions were either sold, donated, or in storage. The house that had been my home for 30 years now echoed with emptiness. "We're going to miss you around here, Daniel," Bill said as we closed the truck. "The neighborhood won't be the same without you and Martha." I glanced back at the house one last time. Martha and I had painted the shutters together, had planted every tree in the yard, had celebrated 30 Christmases in that living room. Now it belonged to someone else. "Thanks for everything, Bill," I said, shaking his hand. "You and Susan have been wonderful neighbors. You come back in a visit, you hear Susan's not letting you off the hook for your weekly chess games that easily." I promised I would, though we both knew the 40-minute drive would make regular visits difficult. Jeffrey's house was in an affluent suburb, a sprawling Tudor-style home with perfectly manicured lawns. When I pulled up behind the moving truck, Sarah greeted me at the door with a polite smile. "Welcome, Daniel. The movers can bring your things to the basement. We've set up the guest room down there for you." The basement. Not one of the 3 empty bedrooms on the second floor, but the basement. I nodded and followed her down the stairs. The room was small but clean, with a twin bed, a dresser, and a small desk. A tiny window near the ceiling provided minimal natural light. The bathroom was across the unfinished part of the basement, past the laundry area. "We thought you'd appreciate the privacy," Sarah explained, noticing my expression. "The kids can be noisy upstairs." "It's perfect," I lied. "Thank you for making space for me." "Jeffrey and I have drawn up some house guidelines." Sarah continued, handing me a typed document. "Just so everyone knows what to expect. Things like quiet hours, shared spaces, and financial contributions." I scanned the paper. I was expected to contribute $500 monthly for room and board, keep to my area of the basement except during designated family times, and adhere to specific shower schedules. There were restrictions on using the kitchen outside mealtimes and rules about guests, not that I had many. It felt more like a boarding house arrangement than moving in with family. But I had sold my house. There was no going back. "This all looks reasonable," I said, folding the paper. "Great. The children are excited to have you here. Dinner's at 6. Jeffrey should be home by then." With that, Sarah headed back upstairs, leaving me to unpack. I arranged my few possessions as best I could. Martha's photo went on the nightstand. My clothes barely filled half the dresser. The bookshelf held the few books I'd kept, mostly favorites that Martha had given me over the years. As I was making the bed, I overheard Jeffrey and Sarah talking in the laundry area, apparently unaware that I could hear them. "I still think we should have discussed the financial arrangements more thoroughly," Sarah was saying. $500 a month barely covers his food and utilities." What was I supposed to do? "He's my father," Jeffrey replied. "But don't worry, once he starts this job, he'll be contributing more. I've already worked out a better arrangement with HR. And if it doesn't work out, if he can't handle the job, there are other options. Assisted living facilities, senior apartments. We'll figure it out." Their voices faded as they moved upstairs, but the damage was done. I sat heavily on the bed, the reality of my situation sinking in. I wasn't family. I was a financial equation to be balanced. That evening at dinner, I smiled and made conversation, complimenting Sarah on the meal and asking the children about school. Inside, I was planning. The job at Tech Vision would start on Monday. Whatever it entailed, I would do it well. I would save every penny possible. And as soon as I could afford it, I would find my own place. Later, in the quiet of my basement room, I took out a notebook and began to write. Not a journal exactly, but a plan. I calculated my monthly retirement income, potential expenses, and how long it might take to save enough for a security deposit on an apartment. The numbers weren't encouraging, but having a goal gave me purpose. I fell asleep that night to the unfamiliar sounds of this new house, the hum of the HVAC system, the creaking of unfamiliar floorboards, the distant voices of my son's family living their lives several floors above me. Martha's face was the last thing I saw before closing my eyes, her photo watching over me from the nightstand. "I'll find my way through this," I promised her silently. Somehow. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I woke at 5:30 wanting to use the bathroom and shower before the rest of the household began their day. According to the schedule Sarah had provided, Jeffrey used the main bathroom at 6:15, and I didn't want to disrupt anyone's routine. I dressed in what I thought appropriate for a maintenance position: khaki pants, a button-down shirt, and comfortable work shoes. I had no idea what the job would actually entail, but I wanted to make a good impression. Upstairs, I made a quick cup of coffee in the kitchen, careful not to make noise. The house rules specified that breakfast was individual responsibility on weekdays, so I toasted a piece of bread and ate it standing by the counter. At 6:45, Jeffrey appeared dressed in an expensive suit and checking emails on his phone. "Morning, Dad," he said, barely looking up. "Ready for your first day?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, rinsing my cup in the sink. Sarah came downstairs next, already dressed for her law office in a tailored pantsuit. She nodded at me while pouring coffee into a travel mug. "Good luck today, Daniel." The children were last still in pajamas, looking sleepy as they reached for cereal boxes. Emma gave me a small wave. "Good luck at work, Grandpa." At least someone in this house seemed genuinely happy to see me. The drive to Tech Vision took 20 minutes. Jeffrey spent most of it on phone calls with colleagues, discussing quarterly projections and investment strategies. I gazed out the window trying to memorize the route in case I needed to find my own way home. Tech Vision's headquarters was an impressive glass and steel structure surrounded by carefully landscaped grounds. The parking garage underneath the building was reserved for executives and visitors. Jeffrey used a key card to access a special section near the elevators. "The maintenance staff usually parks in the lot across the street," he mentioned as we rode the elevator up. "I'll get you a parking pass for tomorrow." The elevator opened onto a bustling floor of cubicles and meeting rooms. People nodded respectfully to Jeffrey as we passed. He led me to a small office near the back of the building. "Frank Williams is the facilities manager," Jeffrey explained. "He'll be your supervisor. I've already explained that you're my father, but I've asked that you not receive any special treatment. I don't want anyone thinking there's nepotism involved." Nepotism for a maintenance job. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frank's office was cluttered but organized, with blueprints of the building spread across one wall and a large scheduling board on another. Frank himself was a burly man in his 50s with a firm handshake and direct manner. "You must be Daniel," he said, standing to greet us. "Jeffrey's told me about your situation." My situation, as though my retirement and widowhood were a condition to be managed. "Yes, thank you for the opportunity," I said. Jeffrey checked his watch. "I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Dad, Frank will get you situated. I'll see you at 5 in the lobby." And with that, he was gone, leaving me in the hands of my new supervisor. Frank gestured to a chair. "So Jeffrey tells me you have some handyman experience." "I was a mechanical engineer for 40 years, I corrected gently. "I worked primarily on power plant designs and industrial systems." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "An engineer? Jeffrey didn't mention that. He said you were good with tools and needed something to keep you busy in retirement." This shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still hurt. My son had reduced 4 decades of professional accomplishment to good with tools. "Well," Frank continued, "the job is pretty straightforward. Basic maintenance around the building, fixing leaky faucets, replacing light fixtures, adjusting thermostats. When more specialized work is needed, you'll coordinate with outside contractors. Think you can handle that?" It was a far cry from designing cooling systems for nuclear facilities, but I nodded. "Yes, I can handle it." Frank showed me around the building, introducing me to other maintenance staff: Luis and Tony, who handled grounds and heavy lifting, and Marge, who managed the cleaning crew. Everyone was polite but busy with their own tasks. At lunchtime, Frank pointed me toward the employee cafeteria. 30 minutes for lunch. The food's decent and subsidized for staff. The cafeteria was crowded with young professionals in casual business attire, most staring at phones or laptops while they ate. I got a sandwich and found an empty table in the corner, feeling oddly out of place. At my old job, I'd had colleagues who respected me. Here I was, just the new maintenance guy, decades older than most employees. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up to see an older gentleman holding a tray. He appeared to be in his early 60s with silver hair and friendly eyes. "Please," I gestured to the empty chair. "Tom Patterson." He introduced himself. "I work in maintenance too." "You must be the new guy Frank mentioned." "Daniel Collins." I nodded. "First day. Retirement didn't stick, huh?" Tom asked with a knowing smile. Something like that, I replied, not wanting to get into the details of my living arrangement. Tom had been with TechVision for 8 years, he told me. Before that, he'd worked construction until his knees couldn't take it anymore. This job's not bad, he said. The young folks treat us like we're invisible most of the time, but the benefits are good and the work isn't backbreaking. As we ate, Tom filled me in on the office dynamics. The company's going through some changes. There's talk of a major new product launch, very hush-hush. All the engineers have been working overtime. What kind of product? I asked, curious despite myself. Tom shrugged. Something to do with medical devices from what I've overheard, but it's all very secretive. After lunch, Frank assigned me my first tasks, replacing fluorescent bulbs in the marketing department and fixing a wobbly table in the break room. Simple jobs, but I took pride in doing them well. By day's end, I had completed a list of minor repairs and even helped Tony move some heavy equipment in the server room. My body ached in ways it hadn't in years. Climbing ladders and crawling under desks used muscles I'd forgotten I had. But there was a certain satisfaction in the tangible results. Things fixed, problems solved, even if they were small problems. At 5 o'clock, I met Jeffrey in the lobby as planned. He was on his phone again, frowning at something on the screen. "How was your first day?" he asked as we walked to the car. "Fine," I said. "Everyone was welcoming." "Good. I told Frank to treat you like any other employee, no special privileges." "I wouldn't expect any," I assured him. As we drove home, I reflected on the day. The work wasn't intellectually challenging, but it was honest, and Tom's friendship had been unexpected but welcome. Perhaps this arrangement could work at least until I saved enough to regain my independence. What I didn't know then was that fate had other plans. The next day would bring an encounter that would change everything, for me, for Jeffrey, and for our relationship. A week into my new job at TechVision, I was beginning to establish a routine. Each morning, I'd wake early to avoid conflicting with the family's bathroom schedule. Jeffrey would drive us to work, drop me at the main entrance, then proceed to the executive parking area. My days were filled with maintenance tasks, everything from unclogging toilets to replacing ceiling tiles. The work wasn't stimulating, but I approached each task with the same precision I'd applied to engineering problems. Tom had become a friend of sorts, sharing lunch breaks and company gossip. On Tuesday of my second week, Frank called me to his office. "Got an urgent one for you, Daniel. The HVAC system in the main conference room is on the fritz. They've got a big meeting in there in an hour, and it's like a sauna. The regular HVAC guys can't get here until tomorrow." "What seems to be the problem?" I asked. "Thermostat reads 70 degrees, but it's got to be over 80 in there. Something's not communicating right between the control system and the air handlers." This was more interesting than my usual tasks. "I'll take a look." The main conference room was on the top floor where the executives and board members held their meetings. It was an impressive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and Frank was right, it was uncomfortably warm. I removed the thermostat cover and examined the wiring, finding a loose connection. That explained part of the problem, but not all of it. The system should have had a backup protocol. I followed the control wiring to a junction box in the ceiling and discovered that someone had bypassed the main controller during a previous repair. Fixing both issues took about 30 minutes. As I was testing the system, the door opened and a man in his early 50s entered. He wore no tie with his expensive suit and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone used to authority. "Is it working yet?" he asked. "We've got the board arriving in 20 minutes. "Just finished," I replied, climbing down from the stepladder. "The temperature should start dropping now. Give it about 10 minutes to reach the set point." He extended his hand. "Richard Williams, CEO. Thanks for the quick work. Our facilities team usually takes days to address these things." "Daniel Collins." I shook his hand. "Just started last week." "New to facilities management?" he asked. "New to TechVision, not new to systems engineering. Your HVAC setup has a design flaw. The backup controller is bypassed whenever the primary needs servicing. It's a simple fix, but someone needs to redesign the control logic." Richard looked at me with increased interest. "You seem to know more about this than the average maintenance worker." "I was a mechanical engineer for 40 years before retirement, specialized in power systems and industrial cooling." "What brought you to TechVision maintenance?" I hesitated, not wanting to embarrass Jeffrey. "My son works here. He thought I might enjoy having something to do in retirement." "Your son?" Richard seemed curious. "Jeffrey Collins in finance." Richard's expression changed surprise, giving way to something unreadable. Jeffrey is your son, the CFO? Yes, I confirmed, wondering at his reaction. Interesting. He's never mentioned his father was an engineer. Richard glanced at his watch. I'd like to continue this conversation, Daniel. Would you be available to stop by my office tomorrow morning? Say 9 o'clock. Confused but intrigued, I agreed. Richard handed me his business card with his office number written on the back. Just come directly up. My assistant will be expecting you. After he left, I finished tidying up my tools, wondering what the CEO could possibly want from me. Had I overstepped by mentioning the design flaw? Was I in trouble already? That evening, I debated whether to mention the encounter to Jeffrey. During the drive home, he was preoccupied with a phone call about budget projections, barely acknowledging my presence. I decided to wait and see what Richard wanted before saying anything. The next morning, I told Frank I had been summoned to the CEO's office. The CEO. Frank looked concerned. What for? He was in the conference room when I fixed the HVAC system yesterday. Said he wanted to talk to me about something. Well, you can't keep the big boss waiting. Let me know if you need anything. Richard's executive assistant, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, escorted me into his spacious corner office precisely at 9. Richard was reviewing documents but stood to greet me. Daniel, thank you for coming. Coffee. He gestured to an expensive-looking machine on a credenza. Black, please, I said, taking a seat in front of his desk. Richard prepared 2 cups himself rather than asking his assistant, which surprised me. I did some checking after our conversation yesterday, he said, handing me a cup. Your credentials are impressive. MIT graduate, former chief engineer at Northeast Power, holder of 3 patents in cooling system design. I hadn't expected this level of research into my background. That was a long time ago. Knowledge and expertise don't expire, Richard said, sitting across from me. I'm curious why someone with your background is changing light bulbs and fixing toilets. The direct question deserved a direct answer. My wife passed away 2 years ago. I recently sold our house and moved in with Jeffrey's family. He thought a job would give me purpose. And he placed you in maintenance, despite your engineering background. I shifted uncomfortably. Jeffrey felt that at my age, my technical knowledge might be outdated. Richard leaned back, considering me. Daniel, are you aware of the Medicore project? I've heard rumors that Tech Vision is developing some kind of medical device. It's more than that. We're creating a portable dialysis system that could revolutionize treatment for kidney patients, but we've hit some technical roadblocks, particularly with the cooling system. The current design overheats after extended use. Now I understood his interest. And you think I might be able to help? I'd like you to take a look at the designs, yes. No pressure, just a fresh perspective. Richard opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder marked confidential. Would you be willing to review these and give me your thoughts unofficially, of course? I hesitated. Jeffrey might not approve. He's been clear about not wanting special treatment due to our relationship. Richard smiled wryly. This isn't special treatment, Daniel. This is me recognizing talent regardless of job title or age. Jeffrey doesn't need to know yet. Just review these and let me know if you see anything useful. Against my better judgment, I took the folder. I'll look them over tonight. Thank you. And Daniel, for what it's worth, I think your son has underestimated you. I spent my lunch break in a quiet corner of the cafeteria studying the Medicore designs. The concept was brilliant. A portable dialysis unit that patients could use at home, eliminating the need for frequent hospital visits. But Richard was right about the cooling issues. The miniaturized components generated significant heat, and the current cooling system was inadequate for continuous operation. By the time I met Jeffrey in the lobby at 5, I had already spotted several potential improvements. The design team had approached cooling as an afterthought rather than an integral part of the system architecture. A fundamental redesign of the heat exchange mechanism would solve most of the problems. That night, after everyone in Jeffrey's house had gone to bed, I spread the designs across my small desk in the basement and worked until nearly 2 in the morning. I sketched alternative cooling configurations, calculated heat loads, and drafted a preliminary solution that could be implemented without major changes to the overall device. The next day, I requested a brief meeting with Richard through his assistant. He made time to see me during my afternoon break. I think I've found a solution, I said, placing my sketches on his desk. The current design treats cooling as a separate subsystem, but it needs to be integrated throughout. If you redistribute these components and implement a microfluidic cooling channel here, you can dissipate the heat more efficiently without increasing power consumption. Richard studied my drawings with growing interest. This is elegant, simple but effective. He looked up at me. Our engineering team has been struggling with this for months. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps, I said modestly. Would you be willing to present this to the engineering team tomorrow? I'd like them to hear it directly from you. The opportunity to work on a real engineering problem again, to use my expertise meaningfully. It was tempting. But I thought of Jeffrey, of his insistence that I receive no special treatment. What about my regular duties? I asked. And Jeffrey? Leave Frank to me. As for Jeffrey, I think it's time he knew what his father is truly capable of. Richard's expression was determined. Meeting room B, 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll make sure all the key players are there. I agreed, both excited and apprehensive about what this might mean for my relationship with my son. I barely slept that night, anticipation and anxiety keeping my mind racing. By morning, I had refined my cooling solution further and prepared to explain it clearly to TechVision's engineers. Jeffrey and I drove to work in silence, as had become our routine. I debated telling him about the meeting, but decided Richard was right. It was time for my son to see me as I truly was, not as the burden he perceived me to be. At precisely 9 o'clock, I entered meeting room B. Richard was already there, along with 6 people I didn't recognize, presumably the engineering team for the Metacore project. Richard introduced me simply as Daniel Collins, a mechanical engineer with extensive experience in cooling systems. I laid out my solution methodically, explaining the fundamental flaws in the current approach and demonstrating how my redesign would solve the overheating issues without compromising the device's portability. The engineers asked probing questions, which I answered confidently, drawing on decades of experience. About 15 minutes into my presentation, the door opened. Jeffrey stood there, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. Richard, sorry to interrupt, but my father has maintenance duties he should be attending to, he said tightly. Richard remained calm. Your father is helping us solve the cooling issue with the Metacore project, Jeffrey. Please join us. I think you'll find this interesting. Jeffrey reluctantly took a seat at the back of the room, his face unreadable. I continued my explanation, though my heart was pounding. In summary, I concluded, by integrating cooling channels throughout the device, rather than relying on a separate heatsink, we can reduce operating temperature by approximately 18 degrees Celsius. This should solve the overheating problem and extend battery life by nearly 30%. The lead engineer, Dr. Chen, looked impressed. This is remarkably straightforward. I can't believe we didn't see it. Sometimes we get too close to a problem, I said. A fresh perspective can help. Richard stood. I'd like Daniel to join the Metacore team as a technical consultant, effective immediately. Dr. Chen, please work with HR to make the necessary arrangements. Jeffrey finally spoke up. Richard, can I speak with you privately? Of course. Daniel, would you mind stepping out for a moment, and thank you. This is excellent work. I left the room, but curiosity kept me lingering near the door. Though I couldn't hear everything, Jeffrey's raised voice carried through. Completely inappropriate. Hired him for maintenance, not qualified for current technologies. Richard's response was calm but firm. Your father just solved in one day a problem our team has struggled with for months. Why didn't you tell me he was an engineer with his qualifications? His experience is outdated. He's retired. He's brilliant, Jeffrey, and you've had him changing light bulbs. I moved away then, not wanting to hear more. The pain of my son's dismissal was sharp, but vindication tempered it. Richard had seen my value immediately, while my own son had discounted me. The drive home that evening was tense. Jeffrey waited until we were in the car before confronting me. What were you thinking, going behind my back like that? He demanded. I didn't go behind your back, I replied calmly. Richard asked for my opinion on a technical matter, and I gave it. You've undermined my position. Do you have any idea how this looks? I bring my retired father in as a favor, and suddenly he's consulting on our biggest project. A favor. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Is that what you think? That giving me a maintenance job was doing me a favor after I spent 40 years as an engineer? Your experience is outdated, Dad. This isn't the 1980s anymore. Principles of thermodynamics haven't changed, Jeffrey. Neither has problem solving. You don't understand, he said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I have a certain reputation at Tech Vision. I'm respected. This makes me look like I'm either hiding your talents or completely unaware of them. Either way, it's humiliating. I'm sorry you feel humiliated by your father's competence, I said quietly. We rode the rest of the way in silence. When we arrived home, Jeffrey stopped me before we went inside. Richard wants you to continue working on the Medicore project, he said stiffly. I couldn't talk him out of it, but understand this, you're on your own. If you fail, it's on you. I understand, I replied. And Jeffrey, I never asked to be an extra mouth to feed. I would have been happy continuing my retirement if you hadn't insisted I needed purpose. His face flushed, but he said nothing as we entered the house. That night I couldn't sleep. The situation with Jeffrey troubled me deeply, but the excitement of working on a meaningful engineering problem again was undeniable. For the first time since Martha's death, I felt truly alive, engaged with the world. The following days established a new routine. Instead of maintenance tasks, I reported to the engineering department, working directly with Dr. Chen and his team on the Medicore cooling system. My solution was being implemented, my expertise respected. The younger engineers, initially skeptical of the old guy, soon began seeking my input on other technical challenges. Jeffrey and I continued our silent commutes, but tension between us grew. At home, he was distant, often working late. Sarah seemed confused by the changed dynamic but didn't ask questions. The children, sensing the tension, became quieter around me. One evening, about 2 weeks after my reassignment, Richard called me to his office. The prototype with your cooling design is working perfectly, he said. This puts us back on schedule for FDA submission by year end. I'm glad I could help, I replied. Help Daniel, you saved the project. Richard leaned forward. I'd like to offer you a permanent position as a senior technical advisor, full benefits, appropriate salary for someone of your experience. What do you say? The offer was unexpected but welcome. I'd be honored, I said, but what about Jeffrey? He's not happy about my involvement. Richard sighed. Jeffrey is an excellent CFO, but he made a serious error in judgment by discounting your expertise. That's on him, not you. He paused. Speaking of Jeffrey, there's something you should know. The Medicore project represents a significant investment for Tech Vision. The board was considering pulling funding due to the technical delays, which would have reflected poorly on Jeffrey as CFO, I realized. Exactly. Ironically, by solving the cooling problem, you may have saved your son's job, not just the project. I hadn't considered this angle. Jeffrey's resistance might be more complex than simple embarrassment or pride. He doesn't know, does he? I asked. About the board's concerns, Numba. That information was kept to a small circle. But he must have felt the pressure. The financial forecasts for Medicore are built into our quarterly projections. This new understanding gave me pause. Perhaps Jeffrey's insistence on my taking a job wasn't solely about avoiding feeding an extra mouth. Maybe he had been drowning in work pressure, seeing his career at risk, unable to express vulnerability. Thank you for telling me this, Richard, I said. I'll consider your offer carefully. That night, for the first time since moving in with Jeffrey, I initiated conversation during our drive home. The Medicore project is moving forward, I said. The new cooling system is working well in testing. Jeffrey nodded stiffly. So I heard. Richard offered me a permanent position as a technical advisor. He glanced at me sharply. Are you going to take it? I haven't decided. I paused. Jeffrey, why didn't you tell me the company was considering canceling the project, that your financial forecasts depended on it? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're under enormous pressure and I didn't know. Jeffrey was silent for a long moment. I didn't want you to worry, he finally said, or worse, pity me. I'm your father. It's my job to worry about you. You've always been so capable, Jeffrey said, his voice softer now. Growing up, you never seemed stressed about anything. You handled everything, your job, the house mom's illness. I felt I had to be the same way. I was stressed all the time, I admitted. I just didn't show it. That was a mistake. I should have let you see that even adults struggle sometimes. When Mom died and I saw you falling apart, it scared me, Jeffrey confessed. I didn't know how to help. Finding you that maintenance job was the only thing I could think of. Why maintenance, though? Why not something related to engineering? Jeffrey sighed. Honestly, I didn't think anyone would hire a 65-year-old engineer, and I was afraid if they did and you failed, it would crush you completely. I thought maintenance would be safe. For the first time, I saw my son's actions not as dismissive, but as misguided protection. He had been trying in his own way to shield me from potential disappointment. I appreciate that you were trying to help, I said. But Jeffrey, I'm still me. Retirement and grief didn't erase 4 decades of experience. I'm seeing that now, he admitted. The engineers won't stop talking about your cooling solution. We pulled into the driveway, but neither of us moved to exit the car. Dad, I'm sorry about what I said, about not wanting to feed another mouth. That was cruel and untrue. I was stressed about finances, about the project delays. I took it out on you, and that was wrong. Thank you, I said, surprised by his apology. I understand pressure can make us say things we don't mean. So will you take the job? He asked. Would you be comfortable with that, working at the same company? Jeffrey considered this. Actually, I think I would. The board is impressed with the progress on Medicore. Richard mentioned you specifically in the last meeting. Having you there might not be so bad after all. It wasn't a warm embrace or a heartfelt reconciliation, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that perhaps we could find a new way forward, father and son, colleagues and family. Over the following weeks, my role at TechVision expanded beyond the Medicore project. Engineers from other departments began consulting me on thermal management issues, and Richard invited me to executive meetings to provide technical perspective. At home, the atmosphere gradually shifted. My relationship with Jeffrey remained somewhat formal, but the tension had eased. One evening, he invited me to join him in his home office to review some project budgets, seeking my input on the technical feasibility of certain timelines. These cooling modifications you've proposed, he said, pointing to a spreadsheet, will they require specialized manufacturing? Not particularly, I replied. Most can be implemented with existing processes. The main challenge will be quality control during initial production. Jeffrey nodded, making notes. That helps. The board is concerned about manufacturing delays. Working together professionally felt like building a bridge between us, not the father-son relationship I might have wished for, but a connection based on mutual respect. Sarah, too, began to treat me differently. Instead of polite distance, she engaged me in conversation, asking about my work and sharing stories from her law practice. The children, picking up on the change dynamic, spent more time with me. Sam asked for help with his science project, while Emma wanted to hear stories about the olden days when I was an engineer. 3 months after my reassignment, the first Medicore prototype with my cooling design passed its final internal testing. Richard organized a celebratory gathering for the project team. Thanks to everyone's hard work, Richard announced, especially Daniel Collins, whose elegant solution to our cooling problem got us back on track. The board has approved moving forward with FDA submission. There was applause, and I noticed Jeffrey smiling genuinely for the first time in months. Later, he approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. Congratulations, Dad, he said, handing me a glass. The team says your design was the breakthrough they needed. Thank you, I replied. It feels good to be useful again. About that, Jeffrey hesitated. I've been thinking. The basement arrangement isn't really working, is it? My heart sank. Despite our improved relationship, was he still planning to move me out? We have that empty bedroom upstairs, he continued. The one next to the office. It gets better light and you wouldn't have to go up and down the basement stairs. Would you consider moving up there? The offer caught me off guard. Are you sure? What about your house rules, the privacy concerns? Jeffrey looked uncomfortable. Those were Sarah's idea, actually. She thought you might feel smothered if we were too present, but I think we've gone too far the other way. I'd like that, I said sincerely. Being closer to the family. Good. We can move your things this weekend. He paused. And Dad, I've been meaning to ask, how are you feeling about your living situation overall? Now that you have a real position at TechVision, I imagine you could afford your own place if you wanted. The question was direct, but not unwelcoming. I considered carefully before answering. I've thought about it, I admitted. For a while, I was saving every penny to move out as soon as possible. I can understand that, Jeffrey said quietly. But lately, I've been reconsidering. Being close to Sam and Emma has been good for me, and working through this adjustment with you has been valuable. I met his gaze. If you and Sarah are genuinely comfortable with me staying, I'd like to remain. at least for now. I'd like that too, Dad. Jeffrey's voice held warmth I hadn't heard in years. The kids would be devastated if you left, and Sarah's actually enjoyed having another adult around who understands her legal jargon. That weekend, the entire family helped move my belongings to the upstairs bedroom. It was spacious and bright, with a view of the backyard and a private bathroom. Sam and Emma made a handwritten sign for the door. Grandpa's engineering lab, knock before entering. "Do you like it, Grandpa?" Emma asked anxiously as I surveyed the room. "It's perfect," I told her, meaning it. That evening we had dinner together as a family, not just occupying the same table as before, but truly engaged with one another. Jeffrey shared stories from his college days that I'd never heard. Sarah talked about her latest case. The children argued good-naturedly about whose school project was more impressive. After dinner, Jeffrey invited me to join him on the back patio. The evening was cool but pleasant. "Richard tells me the board is impressed with your contributions," he said, handing me a glass of scotch. "He mentioned a patent application for your cooling design." "He's asked me to consider other projects too," I replied. "There's an energy efficiency initiative I find particularly interesting." Jeffrey nodded, looking thoughtful. "When you first moved in, I was worried about finances. The Medicore project was behind schedule. Investors were nervous, and I was afraid my position might be in jeopardy." "I understand that now," I said. "What I didn't anticipate was that having you at Tech Vision would ultimately strengthen my position, not weaken it." He smiled slightly. "The board chairman actually congratulated me on bringing such talent into the company, as if it had been my brilliant idea all along." I chuckled. "Did you correct him?" I considered it. Then I decided to simply thank him and suggest we continue to value experienced engineers alongside younger talent. Jeffrey swirled his scotch. It was a lesson in humility for me, one I apparently needed. "We all need those occasionally," I said. "Dad, I want to apologize properly, not just for the extra mouth to feed comment, but for underestimating you, for treating you as a burden rather than the asset you are, to the company and to our family." The sincerity in his voice touched me deeply. "Thank you, Jeffrey. That means a great deal. When Mom died, I didn't know how to help you. I saw you struggling and thought giving you structure would fix everything. I didn't consider what you actually needed." "And what do you think I needed?" I asked curiously. "Respect. Recognition of your value. The same things all of us need." He met my gaze directly. "I failed to give you that, and I'm sorry." In that moment, I saw not just my son, the CFO, but the little boy who had once looked up to me with admiration. Somewhere along the way, we had lost that connection, but perhaps it wasn't too late to rebuild it. "Apology accepted," I said. "And I'm sorry, too, for not being more open about my grief, for not telling you how I really felt." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Mom would be pleased," Jeffrey said eventually, "seeing us working together, figuring things out." "She would." I agreed, thinking of Martha's gentle wisdom. She always believed in second chances. 1 year later, I still lived in Jeffrey's house, though much had changed. My role at Tech Vision had expanded to senior technical advisor across multiple departments. The Medicore device had received preliminary FDA approval and was moving toward production. My cooling system design had been granted a patent with my name prominently listed among the inventors. More importantly, my relationship with Jeffrey had evolved. We still had our differences. He remained more focused on financial metrics than I thought healthy, while I sometimes frustrated him with my deliberate approach to problem solving. But we had found common ground both professionally and personally. The bedroom upstairs had become truly mine, filled with books, engineering journals, and mementos from my career. I had even set up a small workstation where I sometimes brought home technical problems to solve. Sarah and I had developed a genuine friendship. She appreciated having another professional to discuss work challenges with, and I enjoyed her sharp legal mind. The children had fully embraced having me as part of their daily lives. Sam now declared his intention to become an engineer, just like Grandpa, while Emma insisted I help with her science homework because Mom and Dad don't explain things right. On the anniversary of my first day at Tech Vision, Richard hosted a small celebration in his office. "To Daniel," he toasted, "who proved that experience never goes out of style." Jeffrey, who had joined us, raised his glass, and to second chances, he added, meeting my gaze with warmth. Later that evening, as I sat in my room reviewing some technical drawings, I noticed Martha's photograph on my desk. Her smile seemed especially bright, as though she approved of how things had turned out. "You were right, Martha," I said softly to her image. "Joy did find me again, just not in the way I expected." My journey from an extra mouth to feed to valued contributor, both at work and within the family, had been painful at times, but ultimately healing. At 66, I had found not just a new job, but a new purpose, a new relationship with my son, and a new appreciation for the unexpected turns life can take. I often thought of Richard's first question to me in that overheated conference room, and how different my life might be if he hadn't recognized what my own son had overlooked. Sometimes it takes a stranger to see us clearly, to remind us of our value when those closest to us have forgotten. But in the end, what mattered most wasn't the professional recognition or the patent. It was the moment Jeffrey apologized, truly seeing me for perhaps the first time in decades. It was the family dinners where conversation flowed freely. It was helping my grandchildren discover their own potential. Those were the true victories, the ones Martha would have valued most. What I had learned through all of this was that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, to stand up for your worth, to rebuild broken connections. Age brings not just limitations, but wisdom and experience that remain valuable if only given the chance to shine. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you ever been underestimated or discovered hidden value in someone you thought you knew? Leave a comment below. And if you appreciated this journey, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps these stories reach others who might be facing similar challenges. Remember, sometimes life's most painful moments open doors to unexpected possibilities. Thank you for listening, and until next time, value the experience around you, including your own.